Our topic today is called Still Ethical After All These Years. It will be an informal panel presentation. We have 4 speakers, 1 on Zoom, and there will be 3 sitting here. In this informal platform, we're going to talk about what ethical culture means to us. We'll start with our panel discussing their longtime commitments to the society. And then after that, those of us who wish to share our own stories about why we stayed with ethical culture for so long, what it means to us, or if we're newer members, why we joined and what our expectations are. I think this is going to be a great way to reconnect. It'll be a good way to get to know both older and newer members. So the 4 speakers in order of how they will speak are Gregg Gordon, who will join us on Zoom, Marianne Claxton, Jim Griffin, and David Bland. Nice to have a hybrid platform. It's nice to have a hybrid platform this morning, combination of people in the meeting house, which is wonderful that we're back here, and people on Zoom, which is also wonderful. And we have attracted some new members that way and a lot of visitors, which is a hidden benefit. So I'll give the little bit longer introductions of our panelists. Our first speaker is Gregg Gordon. He's on Zoom somewhere. I don't see him, but I trust he's there. He's currently the Vice President of Network Operations at Affinity Health Plan in New York City. His company is about to be acquired by a national healthcare company called Molina Healthcare. He's worked in the healthcare space in the regional area for all of his career. And Gregg has been in our Bergen ethical community since the day he was born in 1971. That's pretty hard to beat, I think. Our second speaker then is Marianne Claxton. She joined in 1966, which is also very difficult to beat. Her career was teaching nursing students in nursing schools, all subjects, from science courses to different fields of nursing, such as obstetrics and medical surgical nursing. Our third speaker will be Jim Griffin. He had a business career of 42 years in sales and management. The first 10 years of that was with a major textile company. Then he spent 32 years in telecommunications, employed with various size companies, including multinational, private, public, and he was also self-employed. And he joined the Bergen Society with his wife, Barbara, in 1982. And our fourth and last speaker will be David Bland. He's been a member since 2001. He joined with his wife, Susan, and their 2 children, Benjamin and Rachel. He worked as a computer programmer since 1980 and retired from that in 2019. And he became our wonderful administrative director of the society that year, 2019, and continues in that position. Prior to that, David was co-chair of family programming, and for a few years also worked on the long range plan committee. So I will now turn it over to Gregg Gordon.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Zooming to you all from my friend's home in New York City, and I'll just give a quick little view of my of Hudson River. And if I look right beyond there, somewhere is New Jersey, and you guys are there. But I'm doing this from New York, so I wish I could be there in person, but today didn't quite work out. Thanks, Lucy, for the introduction. I have been a part of this ethical society since 1971, when I was born. I wasn't a member, and I only became a true member in the sort of adult sense in my late 20s. I went through the Sunday school. I graduated in 8th grade. But I didn't want to stop my participation with our society and our community. And it didn't seem like there was a bridge between Sunday school and adult membership. So somehow, some way I lobbied Joe and others in the society to create a category of membership called junior member, which didn't really quite have any kind of official designation to my knowledge, but I liked having the title of being the first junior member, if that's true. I'll believe it's true until somebody tells me otherwise. And I guess I stepped away from ethical for a little bit during my college years. And then I guess more in my mid-20s, I found myself missing what I thought was an important community in my life. And then as in my late 20s, joined as a full-fledged adult member. And here we are now. I will admit that many chapters in my early life, I made a lot of mistakes. I went against a lot of the things that were taught to me by my parents and through my education through ethical culture. I wasn't the best boyfriend. I shoplifted. I drove too fast. One time I was drunk and got into an accident, and there are a lot of terrible things in my mind. Those were terrible things. And what made it challenging for me, and I think maybe for my parents, largely for my parents, is how someone like me, raised as I was, and with the influences I did have, was capable of making all these mistakes. Somehow, some way, I felt that, at least maybe now in retrospect, I look back and I say those things are maybe easier to understand and rationalize, because deep down, I knew at the time what I was doing was wrong. I just lacked the impulse control, as many youths do. And it's obviously, as an adult, that's a different paradigm now. But that internal sense of right and wrong, of good and bad, of just and unjust, that was something taught to me early on. And it wasn't a lesson that on a chalkboard. It was the way in which we interacted as a community. And it shapes 98% of how I live my life now. I find that there's this duality of credit, in a sense, of how much of this came from the lessons taught through family and how much of this came through the community. I think ultimately, one big lesson I took, unrelated to ethical culture, came from the dissolution of my marriage. Many may know I'm going through a divorce proceeding right now. And in this, in the 10 years we were together, we went through 7 or 8 years of couples therapy. And in that experience, I started to realize how intentions and the way those intentions land can often be very much mismatched. And it helped me to realize how the best of intentions, the way in which you view people, changes a lot based upon your viewpoint and their viewpoint. And that general sense of that, my intention and the way it lands for you, has helped me to appreciate how I can communicate with others differently, how the sense of social justice and fairness and honesty and doing right by people matters even more. And so all these lessons, life lessons that I continue to develop and learn, come back to this sort of spine or this core sense of identity. And again, all of this bred through the existence and our participation in this community. Wrote a couple of notes I would like to read as well. When I consider how the ethical community within itself and with the external community, it's made my personal experience more profound. Social justice, fairness, honesty, respect, loyalty, and the virtues therein have become life-guiding principles. They make up the core of who I am, juxtaposed with what might be a slightly extroverted and garrulous personality. It's been empowering somehow to know that these guiding principles are there to lean on, that there's rarely ambiguity in deciding the right path. Honesty and respect, the human condition and experience, even the self-affirming sense of having made the right call. All of this comes from the lifetime of guidance, having been immersed within the community of like-minded people. And it's further allowed me to create and cultivate incredibly meaningful personal relationships. My best friends in the world, of which I'm lucky to call 5 people, they share the same foundational values, but I'm not sure I would have known how to identify them and join in these decades-long relationships. And then I met an amazing woman named Patty Richards, and she's on this call here, who embodies all of the virtues that our community shares. Of her own volition, she recently joined our Bergen Ethical Society, and I joked that she was always an ethical culturist, but just didn't know it. How lucky I was to have met someone who shares these values. One day I envision, when my life situation gets a little bit more stable, that I'll, try to be part of the ethical leadership team and take on some role to give back to a community that's given me so much in terms of the way I've lived my life and the way that I'm able to find optimism, happiness, and be a really good father to my son, Keon. So with that, I say thank you to the community for everything.
Gregg, thank you. You've had a fascinating journey. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marianne Coxton, and here's the mic.
Are you going to give me questions?
You're going to talk and tell us about your journey in ethical,
I
why
wanted
you
it to be
stay.
easier.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, I came here in 1966 from Queens, New York. My baby was 2 years old, or
You hold the mic in front of your, yeah, that's
don't
better.
wave it around.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so we joined. Somebody said, oh, you're going to TNEC. There's an Ethical Culture Society. They're meeting in the Women's Club. So I went to the Women's Club, and there was Sam Coltman. I love that man. He was like the godfather of the society. And I went in and listened a few minutes. Guess what it was? They were doing a play. The platform was a play about atomic, what's his name? Oppenheimer. They were doing a play. I said, what kind of a thing is this? I didn't know what ethical culture was going to be because I was a Unitarian. It was very exciting to hear this as a platform. And it was over in the Women's Club. The next week or two, they moved into this building and I joined them here and have been here ever since. So that was since 1966. And I'm very pleased to say that at that time, Paul Weston was the leader, and he and his wife and I became very close friends. When he moved to Lubeck and left here, I went up to visit him. We went up to help him build his A-frame house in Lubeck, which is right just under the border of Canada. So it's been a long journey here, and I really have been enjoying it, and I'm going to stay a while.
Thank you, Marianne. We'll now hear from Jim Griffin, who is going to step up to the podium, and I will step out of his way. Here you go, Jim.
Thank you, Lucy. Good morning, everyone. When Elaine asked me to speak about ethical culture and my 42 plus years with the society, I welcomed the opportunity. A lot has happened during this time. We've had emails, Google, Facebook, Apple, electric cars. You can go on and on and on. However, the question is, why am I a member of ethical culture? Let's start at the beginning. My wife, Barbara, and I, and our 1-month-old son, Eric, moved to Teaneck in 1970. 2 years later, our daughter, Audrey, was born. Barbara and I were born and raised Roman Catholic. Over time, we came to believe that the church was indifferent to the important values we thought of at that time. We were looking for a more meaningful, caring, and like-minded community. In 1976, we read an article in the Teaneck Shopper, now called the Teaneck Suburbanite, that the Ethical Culture Society was having its 100th anniversary, and it had a chapter in Teaneck. Barbara and I were curious to know why a society that had been in existence for 100 years had its name ethical we had never heard of. So we decided to check it out. We attended platforms. We liked the simplicity with the seriousness of its topics and the intellectual curiosity and the commitment to social action. After attending many platforms, both our children enrolling in the Sunday school, socializing with family, socializing with members, we officially became members of the Ethical Society in 1982. How has ethical culture influenced my life? Joining the Bergen Society, Barbara and I greatly enhanced our humanistic values. 3 values come to mind: respect, compassion, and empathy. The Bergen Society's invaluable support during Barbara's 7-year struggle with Alzheimer's. Many members reached out to see if they could help. They prepared meals, they visited Barbara, and they spent time with me. The Ethical Society supported our family when Audrey and Nate's 7-year-old daughter, Shannon, courageously fought an incurable brain tumor. When our Dear Barbara, and when my dear Barbara passed in June of 2020, last year, Joe Schumann gave a beautiful eulogy during COVID at Barbara's memorial service. Why have I stayed a member for 40 years? One of the many strengths of ethical culture is that it brings people together from diverse backgrounds and beliefs. To quote our founder, Felix Adler, our ethical religion has its basis in the effort to improve the world and ourselves morally. What is our commitment to social action? Habitat for Humanity. This society was one of the first religious organizations in Bergen County to actively support Habitat for Humanity. As a matter of fact, Teaneck was the first municipality of 70 in Bergen County that had built their first Habitat building. In addition, I recall Margaret Cook, the president of the Habitat for Humanity Society at that time, spoke at one of the ethical culture platforms right at this location. The day after the Newtown tragedy in Connecticut, where 26 school children were killed, our society began a coalition right here in this room. The Bergen County Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence was established by the Ethical Society, most of its members, as well as additional people. We also went to overnight stays at homeless shelters at St. Cecilia's Church in Englewood, where a combination of some of us served as working in the kitchen and others worked at night and stayed overnight. We're a welcoming community. We respect the different beliefs. We appreciate diverse thoughts, and we celebrate joys and concerns. I greatly admire those members whose passion for fairness and decency motivates them to participate in social action. The significant causes such as common sense gun legislation, racial equality, climate change, fair housing, immigration reform, environmental legislation, voting rights, pro-choice, etc. I believe our former leader, Joe Schumann, gave the Bergen Society enormous continuity over the past 46 years with his intelligence, competence, compassion, dedication, and ethical values. Under Joe's leadership, the Bergen Society is recognized as a respected religious community in trying to make the world a better place. What have we done as a family in cultivating long-lasting friendships over these 40 plus years? I had the privilege of attending the Legion of Honor Chevalier Award at the French Consulate for one of our members. We participated in a number of skill auction activities at museums, art exhibits, the New York Botanical Garden. As a matter of fact, the New York Botanical Garden, along with another couple, the four of us hosted up to 16 ethical cultural members who we visited the botanical gardens on a yearly basis for many, many years. We went to and hosted elaborate dinners. We had a theme party at our home on July 14th, Bastille Day, in which we had 50 plus members attend, where we sang French songs, listened to French music, drank French beer, drank French wine, and had a wonderful time. Plus, both Eric and Audrey are proud graduates of the Sunday school. I also was a mentor to 2 Sunday school graduates. One graduate is getting married this coming Saturday, October 2nd. And now, 21 years later, he has given me a great honor by being invited to his wedding. I've been chair of several of the following committees: long-range planning, implementation, caring, financing, pledging, commemorative fund, leadership advisory board. Barbara was chair of the promotions and publications committee for many, many years. We traveled with members. We ice skated in the Rideau Canal in Ottawa over a 3-day Martin Luther King weekend. We skied in New England and stayed at B&Bs for many, many years. We went to Hilton Head, South Carolina, playing tennis, etc. We went to the Cotswolds in England, Costa del Sol, Spain, the Rock of Gibraltar, which incidentally, those two locations we got as a result of a skills auction that we participated in and won. What are some firsts? We formed the Bergen County chapter, the UNA USA, by members of the society. I, on a personal note, participated in my first play ever. It was an original play written by one of our members. Joe officiated at Audrey and Nate's wedding ceremony. Joe presided at Eric and his wife Kristen's naming ceremony for their son Everett James, my grandson. In conclusion, I am proud to say that many of my dearest friends were and are ethical culture members. Although I'm not as active as I once was, I am committed to our humanistic values. Sadly, far too many of our wonderful members have passed. I very much appreciate all those members who support and guided me in becoming the person I am today. I no longer mark other when asked, what is my religion? I'm pleased to say that I am an ethical humanist. With much gratitude, I'm thankful for all that the Ethical Culture Society has given me and my family. I wish the society the best in the years ahead. And I invite others to check us out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Also an interesting trip. And thank you for sharing that with us. And now we have David Bland. David.
Thank you, Lucy. Susan and I joined in 2001, and the primary motivation for that was to give our kids a Sunday school experience. Susan's father was a minister. She grew up in the United Church of Christ. She was very familiar with Sunday school from that. And she, in particular, wanted to give our kids that kind of an experience. And our neighbors were Laura and Marvin Mausner, who were very active, longtime members of the society. And they introduced us to this building and Ethical Society. Now, for me, I was a classic non-joiner and had an allergy to traditional religion. In fact, I was raised Jewish, but I refused to be bar mitzvahed when I was 12 years old. And although it's hard for the 69-year-old David to go back and fully understand the motivations of the 13-year-old David, without a doubt, a big part of it was that I bitterly resented anyone telling me what I had to believe. It was one thing for my parents to tell me what to do. It was another thing entirely for them or a rabbi or anyone else to tell me what I should believe. And my parents, I mean, I'd never really understood that motivation. As an adult, even before I joined Ethical Culture, I will attend religious services like weddings, bar mitzvahs, funerals. That is, I attend them quite happily to celebrate the milestones in other people's lives. But to this day, when I go into a synagogue for a service, like a bar mitzvah, it gives me the willies. So Marvin and Laura introduced us to Ethical. We came. I found the programming very interesting, the people very appealing. The members who were of my parents' generation were unlike my parents in many ways and unlike their friends. And something that I had not understood about myself was that I needed to be part of a group. Most people, I think, are built that way. And the only question is, which group are you comfortable with? My mother used to tell me that. But what did she know? Right? I didn't believe her. And of course, there was that allergy to religion or to anything that smacked of religion. So I really avoided any kind of congregational experience or groups like that. So we got involved pretty quickly, actually, and we were part of the cohort of members with Sunday school kids. And a problem that we noticed was that except for the Sunday school itself, there were few family events, and the regular adult events did not offer childcare. So for example, at a membership meeting, there was no provision for childcare, nor for childcare at any evening event. And we complained about that. And I complained about it a lot. And then one day, you will appreciate this, the nominating committee called my bluff. I got a call, I don't remember from who, and she said, would you like to become chair of family programming? And shivers went down my spine. And I said, no way. I didn't say no way to her. I just said no. But when I got off the phone, I spent about 5 minutes thinking about it. And I realized that this non-joiner needed to put up or shut up. This was my moment of truth. So I called back and I said yes. And I tell you, I was practically shaking. This really unnerved me. And in fairly short order, Amy Baker joined me as co-chair. And we ran it for 6 or 7, maybe 8 years. I'm not exactly sure. And our goal was twofold. One was to offer childcare at all society events. So we would hire the Sunday school graduates who were now teachers. We'd hire them as babysitters. And there wasn't always a demand for that because, you know, especially at an evening event, the kids need to go to bed early. So the parents of kids who needed babysitters weren't always coming, but we always made sure to have it available. And we also wanted to offer one family programming event every month. And we were pretty successful at doing that. We did not quite manage to have one event every month, but we were close. And we had a lot of fun with Halloween parties, movie nights, game nights, etc. We even found a guy who put on reptile shows. He rescued reptiles. And he was, I forget what his affiliation was, but he was actually like a certified reptile rescuer. You know, the county gave him the permission, or the state gave him permission to do that. And that was a fantastic show. And it is the only, and we had a huge attendance, and it was the only thing family programming ever did where we sold tickets because we had to pay the guy. It was the only thing family programming ever did where we would have adults come without children. It was such a great show. And somewhere around 2010 or 2011, I got drafted to serve on a committee putting together the long-range plan. And this was important in ways that I would never have guessed because it solidified my connection to ethical culture. And the reason it solidified it was because it allowed me to know people who I would otherwise not know. And I mean, get to know them well. Like Jim Griffin and his wife, Barbara, Steve Gapoyan and B. Gapoyan, Tracy and Peter Kelly, Ed Gross and Diana Gross, Linda Bennett and Deb Watsky. And all of these people became good friends. And that was something I never would have predicted would happen. And there are 2 other things I want to mention, one of which Jim mentioned, and that's the skills auction. And I was so happy to hear you talk about that, Jim, because aside from being our biggest fundraiser after pledging, it came to have an importance to me that, again, I would never have understood. And the second thing I want to mention is Community Weekend, but first, the skills auction. So I do see a couple of new faces here. The skills auction, which we had to stop when COVID hit, was sort of like a white elephant sale, except you could buy stuff that people were trying to get rid of. But of more importance, you could buy tickets to dinners or social events. So for example, the Matsuis offered a full Japanese dinner at their house. we bought into that. And I should say we bought tickets for that. Oh, and these are auctioned off, okay, with the proceeds going to the society. And at least 2 members have actually offered their country house for a weekend. And we, along with a couple of other couples, rented that house a couple of times and had a great time. And there were also outings, as Jim mentioned, we went on a cruise through the Meadowlands with the Riverkeeper, and that was actually a skills auction offering event. And we bid on these things, but the proceeds would go to the society. Now I'm going to come back to this. The other event that was of inestimable importance to us was the community weekend. We haven't had the community weekend for a while. We had a community day during COVID, which was terrific, but it used to be a weekend event, Friday night to Sunday. And when we were trying to decide whether we should join ethical culture, Peter Kelly said to us that the way to really find out if the society was right for us was to go to this event, and that we'd know by the end. And he was right. Our connection to the society was deepened and enriched by spending an unstressful weekend with the members at this community weekend. And among other things, we saw how the kids who had grown up in Sunday school, what they were like. And I remember distinctly Susan and I saying, we want Ben and Rachel to end up like those kids. Now, Susan and I actually took over running Community Weekend for its last 2 or 3 years until it became too expensive and attendance dropped too low. Lisa Schwartz and Diane Gross are trying to revive that. It's very difficult because of the expense of these things, right? Because you're paying, we would hold it at like a conference center that had meals. Those are expensive, and it makes it difficult, especially for families. But it was a big thing for us. And back to skills auction. So what was important about skills auction to me? It was the interpersonal connections I made with people. And that was really something that had been lacking in my life, right? I had a lot of acquaintances, but few people who in this area. I grew up in Los Angeles, so I'd moved here, and I had few people who were really close friends. And I have to tell you, it's not a cliche to say that our community is made up of the people of ethical culture. Many of them, many in this room, became very good friends for us. Our best friends, in fact. And that, of course, that's what happened with Community Weekend. So let me get back to the point of this talk and the subject of the platform. What keeps me here? So remember that my mother used to tell me that everyone needed to be part of a group. Well, to paraphrase Mark Twain, when I was a boy, I thought my mother was the stupidest person I knew. And by the time I became an adult, I was amazed at how smart she'd become. She was really right. I needed a group. And I would never have used this word, but I needed some kind of congregational experience with no theological content, right? That allergy is still there. Although I realize ethical culture is a religion, I also know that's a controversial statement, even for many people within ethical culture who don't like the term. I do consider it my religion. And I needed that kind of congregational experience. And that day, then I got that call asking me to take over family programming. My decision to call her back and accept was one of the best things I have ever done in my life, because it led to my engagement, not as an abstract intellectual endeavor, but as a flesh and blood undertaking that bonded me emotionally. And of course, you become even better friends with people when you work on projects with them. That's actually the way I got to know Jim's wife, Barbara, because she was head of programs and promotions. And we were trying to figure out, how to promote various things, as we still are. And I worked with Barbara quite a bit on that. And that's how I got to know her. I'd already known Jim somewhat because of the long range plan, but I got to know him even better because I got to know Barbara. And the skills auction events were social events. They weren't project oriented. They were social events, and we got to know people there. And what was also great about Skills Auction social events was that all you had to do was write a check. You didn't have to do any of the work. Somebody else did the work. Until we started offering some social events ourselves. And I was Susan was gung-ho about it. I was very nervous about it. And we've done several since. And when Skills Auction comes back, which I'm sure it will, I hope you'll bid and bid again on the ones that Susan and I offered. So that's why I'm here. I know some people are motivated by social action. I have to tell you, frankly, I am not. I mean, I like it. I'm happy that the society is involved in that. It is, I would say, necessary, but not sufficient in my case. I always liked the intellectual content of platforms. I found it very interesting. I used to joke that we have our own little Chautauqua circuit, if you know what that was. But that too was necessary, but not sufficient. What was really important for me were the social relationships, the close personal friendships that I've made with the people at Ethical Culture. That is priceless for me. And I really don't know what I'd have done without it. Thanks.
Thank you, David. I think we all enjoyed his candor, and that was very interesting. We are going to move to questions. First, I want to thank all of the speakers, each one for sharing his or her journey with us. You have an opportunity to ask questions. You also have an opportunity to tell us your reasons for staying with Ethical, how it influences your life, or if you're a newer member, your future expectations for Ethical. I'll start very briefly with my own story. Some of you've heard it before, but I was raised in the Episcopal Church, and in fact, I was a professional church organist and choir director, employed mostly by Episcopal churches for 25 years while I was building my business career. One day I woke up and it just didn't make sense to me anymore. Just couldn't say those words, sing those hymns, didn't make sense. I had heard of the Ethical Culture Society when I was 19 or 20 years old, when I accidentally heard some platforms delivered by the New York Society. It sort of stayed in my mind. I moved to New Jersey 16 years ago, and my husband died in 2017, and I needed to rebuild my life. I hadn't had much of a life because I'd been his caregiver for a very long time. So I was looking around for things to do, and I saw that there was a group called the Bergen County Film Society. So I said, okay, I'll go to a film. Turned out it was in this building. I talked to David Bland afterwards, and I realized he discussed the group with me, no pressure, didn't ask me to join or urge me to join. And I realized that if he were representative of people who are members, that I would probably like to get to know more people. I then came to my first platform. It happened to be a first Sunday, so Joe Schumann was speaking. And in the course of his talks, he was citing Greek mythology, which excited me very much. And I thought, well, I want more of this. However, I didn't become a member right away. I sort of hung around for about 8 months, coming fairly regularly, because I knew if I did join, I wanted to jump in with both feet, not stand by passively. And I wanted to jump in with both feet and join with my whole heart. So I did do that. And I would say my reason for staying, apart from social action, and which I'm not terribly involved in, but somewhat, and I feel that I'm doing something meaningful with my life. The number one reason is the people and the sense of community and my friends here. And now we will work on questions and answers. I'll turn the meeting over to our Zoom master, Rob Eigenbrod, and maybe we'll go back and forth again with a couple questions from Zoom audience Not questions necessarily, comments or stories, and then a couple from our live audience here. So, Rob.
Very good. All right. Well, let's take a question from Ed Gross. Ed, go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thanks, Rob, and thanks everyone for sharing your stories. I don't have a question. I really appreciated what people had to say this morning. It resonates, of course, as a long-term member. So many of the reasons people stay resonate with me. But what I wanted to mention was the single word inspiration. I stay because ethical culture inspires me to try to be a better person, and ethical culturists, past and present, do as well. And I'd love to mention a lot of people, but then I'd leave people out. So I will only mention Joe Schumann and Jim Griffin. They have been particularly inspiring to me and keep me on the right track and trying to do a better job with my life. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. Lucy, we'll take one more from Zoom. Is that all right?
Sure.
Pam, go ahead. You can unmute.
Thank you, everybody. That was a wonderful, wonderful program this morning. I was really moved by both Jim and by David, but I do have a question, and I really don't understand. I hope you won't be upset for my asking this question. How is ethical culture, David, a religion? What defines us as a religion? Because when I think about religion, I think about God and congregations and people telling me what to do and where to go, and we don't do that in our society. We do ethical deeds. How do you answer that? Can you answer that for me, David?
Actually, I'm going to ask Kurt Collier to come up and answer that question. Kurt, of course, is our interim leader.
Well, if you think of the Latin root of the word religion, it is from religare, which means to bind. Yeah, which means to bind. And the question is what do you bind yourself to? And listening to these stories, I have to say how deeply impressed and moved I was sitting out there in the cheap seats. It just shows that the power of binding to the relationships, which is for ethical culture, is our central practice. If ethical culture had a primary number, it'd be 2, not 1, because of that, just that central idea that we need each other. And your stories and your connections and the things that you build and the work you put into it are all the things that we have bound together to make together. So I'm also one of those people who call ourselves a way of life, but I also understand that a word religion is because we don't have yet in the United States a good enough word to replace that to the level we need to, and that's probably the best answer we're going to get. But it also allows us to have conscientious objectors and to stand up in many ways that religions can do, and we want to be at the seat of that table as well. So it has a political end, but more importantly is what do we bound ourselves to? And these stories right here and everything that I heard on here and the importance of how it is transforming our life is something that we do bind ourselves to. Thank you. Yep.
You know, I just want to add something. So one of the things that I learned at Platform was that there are religions that do not require a belief in God. So there's at least one branch of Buddhism that does not require a belief in God.
Take your mask down.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you. There's, I read a book some years ago by a Hindu scholar, not a white Hindu scholar from the US or Britain, but an Indian Hindu scholar. And he pointed out that in Hinduism, or at least some branches of it, there is no requirement of a belief in God. And that really affected me because it sort of gave me permission to say that ethical culture could be a religion. Why? There's no necessary reason to keep God in it. And that, particularly in America, I think it's harder to conceive of a religion without God than in other countries. But that sort of gave me permission to use the term religion.
Okay. Pam, thank you for asking the question. I'm really glad you did. And Kurt and David, thank you for your answers. I'm a lover of language, so I really enjoyed hearing about the root word of religion. That meant a lot to me. Okay, now let's see, Rob, I guess we should we see from the meeting house if there's anyone
Please, yes, if there's anybody there.
who would like to ask a question or tell his or her own story. Oh, thank you, David.
I'd just like to, it's on, I guess. I'd like to start with a comment and a thank you to David. And I also want to point out that, David, you didn't mention your stewardship of a very successful movie program over a number of years. And that did a lot to bring people together. Everybody loves movies, and we now know that we also love movies with meaning, and those were the kinds of movies that you brought. So thank you for that. And I also was brought up in a household with no real.
They can't see you, so could you maybe stand up, maybe next to David and then.
Sure. Why don't I just stand right here behind you folks? Okay. So anyway, I was brought up in a household without any traditional connection with religion, although we were nominally Jewish and we celebrated the major, what I thought at the time were the major Jewish holidays like Hanukkah. And I've since learned it was actually a very minor Jewish holiday, but to a kid competing with the Christian kids and Christmas around me, Hanukkah was a very major Jewish holiday. But I was brought up free of religious connection. Like David, I was offered a bar mitzvah, but I declined. Religion in the traditional American sense had little meaning for me. But in the sense that I've come to see it as it's practiced in ethical culture, it has a lot of meaning to me. We are a congregation, we get together and we do bind ourselves to each other, and we make deep friendships with each other, and we do wonderful things with each other and learn so much from each other. And it's the lifelong learning that is so important to me. I just wanted to say that.
Okay, anyone else in the meeting house? Susan.
So along those same lines, we joined 22 years ago, and we started, I'm Susan, David, we're together, our kids are together. We joined because of the kids and seeking that community with other families and trying to survive our kids. But then the lifelong learning is also kind of kicked in some of the different ways that I participated in lots of the fellowship of our group. David said, stepping up and saying you would take a leadership role. It changed me. It engaged me more, as you said, Lucy, jumping in with both feet. And it changed me as a person to accept that leadership and then figure out how to be in a community that didn't always think the same and had lots of opinions. And so that's great, because we also did that personal relationship learning, talked about that from the lectern. And I found just always the gears turning in my brain, and it keeps me alive and it keeps me going. And that's really, I think, why I remain.
Thank you, Susan. Back to you, Rob, for any questions or comments from Zoom audience.
I think at the moment we don't have any hands raised, so if there are any more questions in the meeting house.
Anyone else here? Okay, so that concludes our program, but it doesn't, technically does not include our platform, because I invite our Zoom master to unmute everyone on Zoom, first of all, so that they can stay on and chat amongst themselves. And at the end of my script, it says, "You are done." So thank you all and have a great day.
To learn more about us, visit our website, ethicalfocus.org, or email us at admin@ethicalfocus.org, and we'll get back to you. To make a donation, go to ethicalfocus.org/donate. Please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can watch many of our past programs on our YouTube channel.